Welcome to Showdown. I'm Mark Kasen, and it is Thursday. That's June 19th, and guess what? It's Juneteenth. And one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight is definitely Juneteenth. There's no question. There are some people in this country who just don't like this day. They don't want to have any discussion about it. They don't want anybody to remember it. They don't want to do anything about Juneteenth, and we're going to talk about it a little with Brandon Bosley, who any moment should be joining us here in the studio. And in addition to that, obviously there remains a lot going on with the war in Iran, and although the United States is not officially in the war in Iran, we're involved. We certainly are. No question, day by day, everybody wants to know what Donald Trump thinks. And not surprisingly, what has Donald Trump already told us? He told us today. He said, nobody in the world knows what he thinks. From minute to minute, he said it could go any way. Isn't that sweet? Don't you love hearing that United States foreign policy is being decided minute by minute with no strategy, no thought about future possibilities, just Donald Trump bouncing off of his own brain, that beautiful brain that he says he's got. That's scary. I heard some people today talking about what Donald Trump might do, and they were relating it to what John Kennedy did in 1962 during the missile crisis. And in fact, what Kennedy did is he got together with his brother Bobby, and they sort of isolated themselves, and they sat down and they really thought through all the different possibilities before they finally decided how they were going to handle things. And there were people pushing and pulling on them in all different directions. A lot of very dangerous things were suggested, but the two Kennedys went off to the side and really did think things through and came up with some ideas that ultimately did prove to be extremely valuable and saved probably the entire planet from nuclear conflagration. But did they know at the time that it would work that way? No, of course not. So like a lot of things in history, the Kennedys got together. They tried to brainstorm what might be their best approach, and as it turned out, it worked. But you never know ahead of time if it's going to work, that's for sure. But what you don't want is a president of the United States telling you that from minute to minute, not he nor anybody else knows what might happen. Absolutely nobody knows. That could be a problem. This could be a problem. Okay. Anyway, just a few adjustments here with the headphones. Anyway, we're doing fine. I hope that the United States has more going for it right now than Donald Trump flipping a coin from minute to minute as to what he might do in Iran. And certainly one of the things, unfortunately, that might be well going on is that Donald is looking to see which thing that's being done right now seems to be working to his benefit, where he might be able to say, I, Donald, am a winner. Not the United States, not Israel, not the Middle East. I don't think any of it. I think the whole thing really boils down to this. What does Donald think makes him look the best? And if he can figure that one out, then he might go for that. Otherwise, what we're really dealing with is the same thing that he says every single time that he doesn't know what to do, and that is that he'll tell us in 2 weeks what it is that he has figured out. You know, like when he had a concept of a plan. Yeah, that was supposed to solve the health care issues across the United States, and instead what we got is a bill in Congress that is aimed at wiping out Medicaid. Scary situation. But it even gets worse. And here's something brilliant that Donald and his people came up with this week. They decided, in terms of mental health issues, that they would look at the LGBTQ community, and there is actually a government hotline, or I should say there was, a government hotline for issues related to people who might commit suicide. That is an LGBTQ suicide hotline. And, you know, we have one for teens and we have one for people with other kinds of problems. And here we are, we've got a situation where, you know, a lot of people in this country are under tremendous stress because of the way that maybe the majority treats LGBTQ issues. There have been many people who want LGBTQ rights to be completely wiped out, and just living life. The difficulties of people who might think that the way you're behaving or what your thoughts are about your own personality, they might think, you know, you're not only wrong, but, you know, you're horrifically wrong. I mean, they really look at sometimes groups of people and put them down in ways which can be very traumatic. And in the case of LGBTQ people, this hotline was instituted because there's a high degree of suicides among people who are viewed by society in a negative way and take this view on themselves in a fashion that makes them feel so horrible about themselves that, in fact, they might be contemplating suicide. And so that was the purpose of the line, to try to help these people to deal with their problems and to not be facing fears of gee, I think I might want to commit suicide. And if you do, or if you know somebody that does, then maybe you need help through this line. Well, the bottom line to all of this is, shut it down. No, the government doesn't want that service. No mental health issues to help LGBTQ people, which, by the way, that's one group that's been thrown out on this, but there's another one too, and that is students. High school students around the United States, especially in cities, inner city situations where there's a lot of trauma, a lot of pressure, and a lot of these students face very complicated lives and go through lots of different circumstances that put their mental health in jeopardy. And so what's happened? Well, under Title I funds, there was money that was made available to provide mental health services for these high school students in inner cities. Completely wiped out. Shut it down. That has been stopped. No mental health services left at all for these young students in potentially traumatic situations in inner city circumstances. Is that surprising? Of course not. We know that AmeriCorps, which is a very widespread program across the United States that provides all kinds of different services for young people and people in different communities that might need help in some fashion from government, for health services, possibly getting jobs, possibly being involved in doing service work for other people, that is, volunteering in situations where people might be in trouble. You know, all kinds of ideas that sort of tack on a little bit to the whole idea of the Peace Corps, which really was, of course, international, but which, you know, was sort of focused back in on us and communities in the United States where we could provide services and help for people within our own country. And with that in mind, there is a separate facility that actually operates in cities all the way across the United States, and that's Job Corps. And Job Corps is particularly interesting to me because they came on the Freeman Bosley Jr. show maybe a month ago, the local people in charge of Job Corps. And we had a good conversation on the air, and after that, I went into their community in order to see what was going on locally with regard to Job Corps. Now, they had said a lot of things about what they were doing, but I just wanted to see it. And I'll tell you, it was pretty impressive, and even more impressive than just the work that they're doing, because what they have created over there is a really strong and interesting community, and that community includes a lot of brand new buildings that are part of a campus which just brings all this Job Corps operation together in North St. Louis. And what's further really interesting about what's happening over there, in the first place, they do a lot of work with regard to people who need services to support the trades. So it could be people involved in engineering kinds of things. I mean, low-level engineering, but electronics, could be plumbing, could be painting homes, all kinds of different trades that people could be involved in at Job Corps. And other kinds of educational services as well, so that these young people who would have an opportunity to go out and get a job in some kind of a service industry would also have some additional education that would maybe put them up to at least a good high school diploma. And Job Corps, by the way, just so you know, has been there for 60 years. Now, it's only lately that they've built this little campus, but you know, they're doing a heck of a job. They're trying to create an operation that would make it possible for young people who aren't really sure of what they're going to do with their education or with a future job, a place where they can go in order to figure out what kind of job they might be looking at without an extensive educational program, but with a program that would give them enough learning and enough even internship kinds of things that would allow them to be able to go out and get a job and do well in the world. Surprise, surprise. Donald Trump said that he was shutting all of that down. Every bit of it. All of AmeriCorps, all of Job Corps, shut it down. And the only thing that saved it for the moment is, like with many other situations, the courts were asked to look at what was happening with these programs and whether or not the Trump administration had the right to shut these things down. And as it turns out, the courts did decide that they did not have the right, or at least that there is enough evidence that they might not have the right, that the people from Job Corps and AmeriCorps generally could possibly prevail in a lawsuit. So as a result of that, the prohibition against Job Corps funds was blocked. So again, Donald Trump was not able to do things that he wanted to do in terms of destroying programs, but he's certainly close, and he's certainly on the track to try to accomplish that. And it's hard to say, as in all of these cases, where the end result will be. The courts so far are backing the use of funds that were allocated by Congress with the very specific idea that these programs were desired by Congress. And of course, the whole bottom line to this is that Congress, when it sets up programs, votes for them, and allocates funds, they're not supposed to be able to be blocked by the executive. It's supposed to be that those programs are supposed to go forward, the funds are supposed to be utilized, and only Congress is supposed to be able to step in and halt what Congress had previously said that they wanted to do. So far, Donald Trump has failed on all of that. He has failed to step up and block these programs. He even failed in the case of Harvard, for example, and other schools as well, where he's attempted to block the international students, and of course the government did, or the courts did come in and say, no, you can't do that, and if you can, it's going to have to go to another court before that's decided. So that was all put on block as well. Here's the problem. When it comes to Job Corps, okay, it's a program that's operating, and now it has to continue operating. In the case of some other programs, the courts have said no. The executive branch cannot come in and shut it all down. However, there are some things that have happened at the university in terms of blocking some funding that otherwise would have gone to some of the top schools in the United States, involving research to look at cancer and Alzheimer's and things like ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and other, major issues that we know so far we've not had fabulous success. We've had some in cancer for sure, but we know we have a way to go. And so here we are, and what we've got is the government trying to, number one, block the programs, and number two, block the students coming from other countries who often were so important in doing the research on these programs. So let's say for a moment that Trump is blocked and that he can't do what he wanted to do. But let's say you're a student in a foreign country and you want to come here and do research on a program because you think that you've got some ideas and you've done some work in your country and you're pretty advanced in your area of science, and you think you could make a difference. So are you going to come to the United States when you know that Donald Trump is doing everything he can to block you? And the answer is, some might come, many won't. I wouldn't come. I mean, if I had an idea that I could come to the United States and do research, but instead I was offered significant money to go to Cambridge or Oxford or the Sorbonne in France or some other university across the world, one of the great ones, why wouldn't I choose to just go to one of these other countries where there's nobody trying to block the research, nobody trying to prevent me from getting any kinds of of support, nobody trying to prevent me from even staying at the university or even possibly in the United States completely. It might be that some of these people might be thrown out. So, it's complicated. But everything in the world is complicated, but nothing is as complicated as when Donald Trump starts attacking people for no good reason whatsoever, except for that he wakes up in the morning and has a whim. And he basically is saying that about Iran and how he might act when it comes to making decisions about their future. And furthermore, he's clearly doing the same thing with regard to many programs here in the United States. And just let me also say, because this is so important, there was a case, and this is 1984, so we're talking 41 years ago, and this was called the Chevron case at the Supreme Court. And one of the reasons that it was interesting, it had to do with the EPA. And the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, was trying to decide what they were going to do about some pollutants coming out of Chevron's oil production. And in the end, the case was decided in a way that was very important, and it was called Chevron deference, and it was what we call deference to agencies in the United States government that have experts that know what to do about different kinds of problems. I talk about this all the time because it's really one of the most important areas of governmental decision-making in our entire country. Who gets to decide if the EPA is going to protect our air and water? Who gets to decide if our food is going to be safe? And who gets to decide if the drugs that we use are going to be considered safe and effective? And the answer is, it all comes from these governmental agencies. And under Chevron deference, the experts were supposed to make the decisions at these agencies once Congress laid out their goals. So Congress would say, our goal is to establish a certain level of protection, like let's say we want to end polio. So, okay, you would have the FDA that would get involved in deciding what kind of drugs can be used or vaccines in order to keep the country safe from polio. It wouldn't be a congressman that would decide how to either implement or do the research to protect us from polio, but it would be a congressman that would say that is our goal, is to find an end to polio, or measles, another one, both of which are surging upward right now at a time when we previously had achieved unbelievable success in knocking out polio and knocking out measles and a number of other different kinds of diseases as well. And of course, we know that one of the issues was COVID. Yeah, and even that one has become an interesting problem facing us right now, because one of the decisions that the government has made are geniuses who have no background whatsoever in anything having to do with protecting people from diseases that are communicable, and yet they're making decisions. And one of the decisions they're making with regard to COVID is they're saying, except for a very small group of people, that we're going to prevent, in general, the population from being vaccinated for COVID, which then gets turned over to insurance companies, and then they start looking at this, and they start withholding support for the vaccine, and before you know it, the same thing that's happening for measles and polio could be facing us even as soon as this fall for COVID. And we know that measles and polio are exploding on the American scene, simply because RFK Jr., how did he ever get a position like he's got? But he's out here telling people that some of these vaccines are not safe and effective, and we should not be using them. And as a result, look what we're getting. We're getting tremendous harm to our certainly young people who are coming up with measles, and also just in general polio, which, again, we had stopped all of this. This was done. There was no more concern about measles, no more concern about polio. And here we are. It's right in our face all over again. Hard to believe. But thank you, government. And again, the point is that under Chevron deference, the experts were going to decide what to do about these problems. Under the Trump administration, hard to even say those words, the answer for them is Congress decides everything. And there is no more deference to these expert agencies where people actually know what they're doing. And instead, crackpots, lunatics, crazy people with no connection to any kind of education can make decisions about everything from polio, measles, all the way to fluoride for your teeth. I mean, why would you take fluoride out of people's water? Well, because RFK Jr. believes that, I guess he watched Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, and apparently he believes, as Jack Ripper, General Jack Ripper said, yeah, okay. So apparently the decision, was made that they would block something as simple as fluoride and make it impossible for people to just get the natural protections that we've offered for tooth decay over the last 50 years. Of course, General Ripper in Dr. Strangelove said that this was one of the greatest dangers to the United States in all of our history, that is putting fluoride in the water. And there were people who did believe it back then, and they thought it was a communist conspiracy. But unbelievably enough, something that was meant to be satire in 1965 is now viewed as medicine in 2025. Hard to believe, but that is where we are. Now, what I want to do is take you from the world of lunacy to the world of great commerce, where you can hear about and think about some great companies that will provide you with everything from clothing to food and even jewelry. And I'm going to start with my very good friends at the St. Louis Suit Company in Clayton. They're on the corner of Central and Forsyth. And I can tell you right now, after 30 years in that location, a lot of people have concluded they know what they're doing. They just do a great job. They provide suits and shoes and shirts and overcoats and hats and you name it. If it's men's attire, they've got it at the St. Louis Suit Company. And we all know, of course, that the ties at the St. Louis Suit Company are $5 each. And, of course, every day when I'm on the show, I'm always wearing one of those ties for $5. People look at them and they go, what? 5? Are you kidding me? They don't believe it. But if you go to the St. Louis Suit Company, you will believe it. Great clothing, great prices for beautiful ties. And by the way, if you're thinking about getting married, they are terrific when it comes to wedding attire at the St. Louis Suit Company. They're expert, and they handle everything for men at your wedding. So there they are, St. Louis Suit Company in Clayton, corner of Central and Forsyth. Jay and Nick, father and son, they run the place along with the rest of their family. Great suit company, 30 years in Clayton. And by the way, I'm going to be joined here shortly by a guest who I'm going to have to ask a question about the St. Louis Suit Company. And I don't know if he knows the answer, but we're going to find out in a minute, so we'll get to that. But the next one I want to tell you about is you're going to go right on down Highway 40, and you're going to find yourself at Hampton, and you're going to go to 4506 Hampton. And over there, you're going to get jewelry. And I mean to tell you, they got every kind of jewelry that you've ever wanted to think about, and they will get you set up. They first of all, they do designing of jewelry themselves. But in addition to that, if you come in with some ideas about designing jewelry, they'll help you with that as well. They fix watches. They buy and sell coins and gold. And the place is run by my good friend Al and his son AJ. They have a great business there, and they are very fair when it comes to making decisions about the value of gold and coins. And all you got to do is walk on in, 4506 Hampton, and like I say, everything from coins and gold to every kind of jewelry and designs, they are Jewels on Hampton, and you'll love Al and his son AJ. They're there. Okay, now talking about food, Brandon, have you ever eaten at Telena's?
I haven't.
Okay, but do you know about Telena's?
I've heard about
it.
I haven't had the pleasure to make my way down.
Yeah, Telena's has been there for 40 years.
That is a long time.
That's a long time. They got one out in Creve Coeur now. They used to have one in the city too. That one shut down maybe 10 years ago. But they've been around. They're great Italian food. And I don't know about you, but personally, I happen to love spaghetti and meatballs.
I love pasta.
Yeah, well, everybody loves pasta.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, spaghetti and meatballs is my favorite. And anyway, that's Telena's in Creve Coeur, and it's a great little operation. And then finally, there's a really nice restaurant out west in Chesterfield, and it's called Wenty's. Wentee. I don't know. Do you ever heard of them?
I have not.
Yeah, that's so far out, maybe
No,
not.
but it's good to know. So
yeah,
I love food.
Yeah, they're at 18,000 Chesterfield Airport Road, and out by the Chesterfield Airport there, and they have wings. Everybody loves their wings. That's what they consider to be their number one food, and lots of people love wings.
I love chicken.
It's not my thing. It's not my thing.
Really?
But I'll tell you what is. Baby back ribs.
Okay.
And I love their baby back ribs. And along with they've got onion rings that are great.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're great. And they got salads and hamburgers and cheeseburgers and everything else. And they've got the best iced tea I've ever had. And they're great. And that's Wenty's. And that's out in Chesterfield Valley. But let me circle back here for a minute, because this is the one I wanted to ask you about, and I was thinking about asking you about this all night. You ever go to the St. Louis Suit Company in Clayton?
I don't think so.
Do you know where it is?
I do.
Okay.
I'm very familiar with it.
Okay, because here's the deal. Both your dad and your grandfather, both.
St. Louis Suit Company.
Absolutely.
I probably got my first suit from there.
Yeah, what am I talking about? But anyway, your dad and your brother. Yeah, Freeman.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, he really buys the stuff out there.
Okay.
I mean, that I know, because they tell me, when I go there all the time, they tell me about what Freeman buys in there in between his fishing expeditions.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we know he's a fisherman.
Oh yeah, he definitely fishes.
Yeah, that's
sure.
that. I didn't even know that until they told me.
We just got finished fishing last Sunday for Father's Day.
Okay, so you were doing that, but was he fishing in Costa Rica? Was that?
Oh yeah, he stay fishing.
Yeah, because
he's fished in
all over.
Yes, in multiple states, countries. He loves to fish.
Yeah, and you know Felicia, of course, and Felicia says to me, she says, you know, it's great that Freeman fishes. The only thing is, it'd be nice if he would tell us that he's not going to be here because he's fishing. But that's another story.
I think that he just gets up and goes. He just wakes up and says, "I'm going fishing."
Going fishing.
I'm having it.
Yeah.
You know, I've had a good week, or you know, I think it's a good stress reliever. And you know, since I was a child, that's what he loved to do. My dad used to own a boat, and I mean, unfortunately, we never got to take that boat out.
Okay.
But they would go on these fishing trips, and oddly, my dad would come back with really, really big fish, like trouts, like 40, 50, 60, 100 pounds. I mean, really, really heavy. And stick them in the freezer, and we'd never eat them.
Wow.
They just be down there for like years, just frozen, just.
Yeah. Well, no, it is funny because I got this fish stuff that people are all of a sudden telling me about, but you know, I've known Freeman 30 years, and I never knew about the fish, but now I know.
Now you
okay,
know.
You always learn something. You know, in a serious situation, which is really unfortunate, but I say amazing, but I guess not that amazing. You know, obviously today is Juneteenth.
Understood.
And there are a lot of people that believe this is a really important holiday. The country has dealt with, you know, issues, you know, connected to slavery since its inception. I mean, this is 400 years of problems, and it's not over by, you know, not even close.
Yes, sir.
Not even close. So I was surprised in a way when Donald did not cancel Juneteenth, because canceling everything else black that he can get his hands on, okay? But, and some people asked me, they said, what did he do about Juneteenth? They said, he's letting it go. Why do you think? And I guess the answer is he was probably scared that might be a step too far right now. But do you know what he did at the White House in order to, I guess, to sort of stick it in a little bit? And
What did he do?
okay.
It's a lot going on.
Yeah, so many things.
Yeah.
He removed a statue of Martin Luther King from the White House. Now,
That's interesting.
He's already, you know, taken, you know, all these different exhibits out of museums. You know, all these things, anything black, you know, he, you know, got them out of there. You know, the exhibit, the famous one, you know, the sit-in situation at Woolworth, you know, years ago, and he got that out of the museum that it was in, and he was shutting them all down. But again, he didn't step up on Juneteenth and end the holiday, and I guarantee you there are a bunch of those white people on his side of, you know, MAGA, whatever you want to call that nonsense, that would love it. But I guess he still was afraid to do it, although he's doing these other things, getting rid of DEI and, you know, all. But yanks the Martin Luther King statue out of the White House exactly at the same time as Juneteenth. I don't think that's an accident.
Well, so this is, and I guess I may have maybe a slightly different perspective on it, right? When we look at things being yanked from history, because that's what this is. It's removing history of certain things that happened that would create the circumstances for America that we live in today, and the America that we've experienced over the last 50 to 75 years. America's growth, different booms in different fields. There's a significant amount of advancement that has happened over the last, I would say, 100 years. And not the Trump administration, I don't think that they've started the removal of American history. I think it started with, you know, just my personal opinion, all the way back to like the Clintons. For a long time, they've been removing and working on removing certain teachings from the schools. They've been working on removing having slavery in a lot of these social studies books. They've been working on removing I would say the general history, and it goes with desensitizing, and let me not say, I say hypersensitizing our children, right? you get to talking about slavery in school and things like that, and we feel like these children aren't in a mental space to where they could actually accept and deal with whatever it is that those conversations will bring, whether they're tears, anger, all these different things. We've been hypersensitizing our children for like the last, I would say 20 to 30 years. Like it's crazy. But one of the ways that they're doing that is removing history. And it's not just the Trump administration. So we talk about shadow governments. We have conversations about who's actually in control about a lot of different things. I'm not going to say that Trump definitely is in control of saying yes or no, because I think we've seen in multiple circumstances he's going to do things that he wants to do. And generally, I think when he makes certain decisions, he stands on them and goes out and speaks about them. Trump has a mouth on him that allows him to say whatever it is that he likes to say. So I think personally that whatever the hypersensitization is going on in the White House in general, and those folks that coexist in terms of running the government also have a part in removing those particular things. Once again, it didn't start with Martin Luther King. Once again, going all the way back to slavery, they're trying to even remove that from being in certain social studies books. And that's an important question when it comes down to, the Martin Luther King movement. What is his actual movement about, right? How does it affect us today? And what happens if we don't have conversations about what America's history is in 15 or 20 years? When these kids grow up, and unfortunately, this all becomes like a myth, right? We've had conversations throughout the years, we don't see any slave ships. Where are all the slave ships at, right? They had all these big old boats. You had millions of people coming over on them. Where are the slave ships? They got rid of that history. So we have to figure out at some point in time, realistically, how do we as the people who are going to pass this information down orally or physically continue to ensure that our children have the information that they need to be able to look back in history and see where it is we've been so we can know where we're going. And it's not just one administration, because after Trump is done, right, there's another president that comes in who has the ability to not only put it back, right, but if he wants to, he can continue on that path, and, we can just keep on seeing history disappear right in front of our faces. So, I don't side with Trump on it or not side with Trump on it. I'm trying to figure out and understand where that agenda is in its place as a whole, because it's not just about that statue, right? It comes down to removing what the history of Martin Luther King was, what he did, and the movement that he created. And I don't think that's just on one person who would be the president. I think that there is a group of people in a think tank, and they have to be helping him make these particular decisions and then saying that it's his sole decision. Yeah. I think that he is balancing one thing over the other. And if you're going to remove the statue, then we're going to leave Juneteenth. I think that there's a balancing act going on. We can talk about the negative all day because there's plenty of negative things to talk about, but that's what we see on the news all the time. That's what our entire existence, unfortunately, from my perspective over the last 15 or 20 years, we focus so much on the negativity that we can't even see what positive is happening in front of our faces, because people jump to negative connotations, just negative energy in general. So I don't understand why he's doing what he's doing, but I'd like to have a better idea of why he's making the decisions.
Yeah. Well, one thing for sure, you're correct in saying that it's not just him, because actually a lot of this goes all the way back even before the Clintons to George H.W. Bush,
yes,
who ran using Willie Horton. Remember the Willie Horton commercials?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So so that was, when it famously, worked, against Governor Dukakis, but then it came back big time, maybe 10 years ago, when Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so he ran not against DEI, he ran against critical race theory.
Right.
But it's the same story, same way of playing it, and he surprisingly beat a very strong opponent, but again it was because he used the black card, and now Donald Trump has I think done this in bigger ways than anybody has ever done it in our lifetimes, although it's still just a continuation of this whole attitude. And it's people out there who are saying And they say this, that black people in this country have gotten too much. We've given them too much, always trying to do something for black people, always, worried that black people have been mistreated and trying to, so they're saying, stop that. Enough of that. We gotta get on with, in fact, talking about supporting white people, which incredibly, the courts just this last week said that there was some evidence of reverse discrimination against white people. Hard to even believe. And how, as a black person, do you feel? I mean, how bad does that make you feel? I mean, I think it would make me feel horrible.
Well, I think it's putting things into perspective, right? So you have a lot of white children that are growing up right now, and once again, because they aren't being taught a significant amount of their family's history in school. Like, my last name is Bosley, right? You got Bosley Medical out here. You got Bosley Hair Growth. I didn't get my name for myself. I didn't make this name up. I was part of a slave family of slaves, and at some point in time, we got our last name from Massa. Like, being realistic, right? 90% of the Americans here that are African Americans have last names like Jones, Johnson. We have common last names that we share with white people, right? And you don't generally have that with like Italian whites, or let's say German whites. Like, you're not running around and having like many black people with like German last names and things like that. And we don't all go to the same schools. So you don't have a significant amount of black people in schools with Italians, Germans. We're in school with European Americans, or a variation of different immigrants that came in back in the early 1800s, but would themselves even identify as American, white American Europeans. So, with that being said, you have children growing up that are a part of, I think, the American fabric themselves. And I'm an American citizen, and I didn't have anything to do with slavery. My parents didn't have anything to do with slavery. My great-great-grandfather probably did, but that's not on us, right? So when you have a significant amount of time go by based on what those thoughts are for those two generations, and say, hey, my mama didn't do anything, my child didn't have anything to do with that, why are we still blaming, white people for our oppression? Why are we still blaming white people for our circumstances? Why are we still blaming white people for all the things that have taken place? You have that, what I would consider the reverse idea of racism, because now you got everybody fighting for minorities because we talked about it for 200 years. We've been able to speak our minds and not get our heads put, in a noose for about I would say a good 100, maybe 150 years, somewhere around there in certain parts. Right?
And it's only been a few years since Congress actually passed a law saying that you're not allowed to lynch people.
Yeah, for sure.
Couple years, that's
it.
it.
It hasn't been much. So these children are growing up, and I think with a sense of, and entitlement is not the right word, but it's a part of it, because, if my father went out here and murdered 1,000 people, right, that would be a part of my family's history forever. No matter where I went, man, your daddy was a bad man. Your father killed my father, my uncle, my auntie, my brother, my sister. He wiped out entire generations, right? And I have to say this, imagine if we knew whose Hitler children's was, right? And where they are right now. Everybody would have it out for them. No matter where they were, you'd have a significant amount of people treating them like crap on a regular basis because of their family's history. They can't do nothing with the father, he's gone. Yeah. So I'm gonna get on the children and his lineage. Anytime they do anything bad or anything that would seem, anywhere close to being, being racist to other races, you'd be like, oh, well, that's in his blood. So it's the same thing when you look at actual history when it comes down to us. Just because you didn't do anything and your child didn't do anything, your grandfather and great-grandfather did. So that history still follows us. It's in our blood, right? It makes us not trust white people or the system in a certain way, and we continue to fight for all the things that we haven't had. I mean, just in the early 1860s or 1830s, we just were able to start back reading the English language. So it hasn't even been like 200 years since we've been able to actually read and write without being decapitated or being hung or being shot. So,
And that has an impact on the current generation. There's no question about it. When people say to me, and they get upset and they say, well, why aren't you jumping up to talk about black people who are doing this or some other thing? And I say, well, yeah, they've got a responsibility for what they do for sure, but beyond that, you got to keep in mind that in this country, white people are complicit in whatever bad thing is happening in black communities because they created this mess in the first place by doing exactly what you've described. And there's research and there's a guy over at WashU, his name is Jeff Ward. I don't know if you've ever come across him. There's a black professor over there who has made the argument that if you go around the country and look at areas where there's a lot of racial violence today, that these are often places where white people created just unbelievable havoc and trauma on black people in those communities years and generations back. And so again, this is not, it's not like you can just say, well, because white people did it, you can do whatever you want. That's not the issue. The issue is because white people did it, maybe white people have a responsibility to stand up and say, look, let's see if we can fix some of this.
Oh, I agree. I think white people use what you call plausible deniability to their to mask, right, what has happened, because it's easier to say I didn't have anything to do about it and I didn't know about that than to actually go do the research and know who you are, where you came from, right? Because white people definitely take wealth, and if it was passed down from blood money or wherever it is, they gonna accept it. Right? Sure. Don't even ask many questions about it. But realistically, if white people took the time to really truly learn about, I believe, their heritage, where they come from, and where it is that they played a role in what happened in the building of the United States and the atrocities that took place, I think that would give them a great deal of compassion towards what it is that they see out here that they would be considering to be the wrong way to act per se by like black racists, right?
Yeah. And along those lines, if you go back to the 1840s and 1850s when black people in this country were slaves, okay, we opened up the West and we had the homestead laws, which white people took off throughout the West, and if they got their hands on a parcel of land, they could own it and they could operate it, and if they did, then they could keep it. There weren't any black people getting all those things. They were on plantations.
Well, and they were being, so they had book burnings. You had a significant amount of history, just like they erase history, like now, exactly what we were talking about earlier. It's very easy to go out and remove people's ability to legally fight a system when you don't understand the language. And when you kill off a significant amount of people who do understand the language, and all you have to do is tell the children you can't read, they don't grow up knowing what their rights are. They don't grow up knowing that they have land, or they have land covenants. They really don't know. So back in 1799 or 1803, when the Louisiana Purchase happened, you had a significant amount of black people that already lived here, right? And even those individuals who were already free found themselves significantly on the other side of the United States land grab, because you had a gang of individuals, once again, who knew how to read, who were immediately told that you can't read the English language, because this was French and Spanish territory, prior to it. So a lot of these people spoke French, they spoke Spanish, and when you tried to learn the English language, or you get caught with books or whatever it took for you to learn that language, you were significantly beat or harmed. And once again, back then, the police weren't out here locking folks up for beating a slave to death or killing whole families. They were working with them, and we got to remember what the police were created for as well. They were slave catchers.
And also, and they were, and also that throughout this entire time, that these groups that came over, for example, from other countries that were just immigrating
Yeah.
here. Okay, you know, my family was part of that, and you know, we came over here. The name of our family was Kazanovich. Okay.
Kazanovich.
Yeah, and when they came across, you know, Ellis Island in New York, the guy looked at it and said, "Okay, Kasen." Okay.
Is that Italian?
No.
Kazanovich? That sounds
No,
more.
it was Russian.
Russian. Okay.
Yeah, it was Russian.
Russian.
And but you know, they changed, you know, our names as well. And but here's the thing: if you look at what's happening today, and you look at the immigrants, and as an example, just this afternoon, these crazy immigrant catchers try to get into Dodger Stadium and set themselves up in there to where they could grab people out of Dodger Stadium. And the Dodgers said, no, you can't come. Get out of here. You know, so there's some people pushing back, and there are a lot of people who are caving in. And a lot of people just don't like somebody that they think is not the regular white guy. And of course, Donald has really exacerbated that problem by blocking all these different people from other countries to come in here, and at the same time saying, however, white people from South Africa,
come on back.
come
home.
on,
They're saying, come on home.
we want you guys.
Yeah, we want you back.
Yeah.
And you know, and real talk. So for me, and this is gonna sound crazy to some people, I don't see nothing wrong with that. Like, and I don't, right? I think it's the equivalent of people in parts of Africa saying to African Americans, hey, come on back home. You know, like, we know where you came from. You got, you know, maybe family here. You all haven't been back since they took you there. So we can make you dual citizens. Like, that same thing is kind of open. So, you know, if you have, I would say, American bloodlines that have went over to Africa for whatever reason, and you have a president who's saying, we want you to come home, like, I don't, it's not taking a side. I'm trying to understand how Trump is thinking, right? I can easily take a side.
If he's thinking.
Well, if he's if he's thinking in a way where it works for him, because we all have to remember, right? Our president is not a president for everybody, and we sometimes forget that as American citizens, because we are.
Yeah. Well, let's not forget also that the Central Park Five. He was right there. He knew that those young people had not done anything to the lady in Central Park, and the DNA proved everything, and he still immediately put out a full-page ad in the newspaper saying, execute them.
And that was a terrible thing for him to do at that time. And sometimes we make really stupid decisions when we are young, and I do believe at the time where all of that was going on, it was acceptable from other white people to be that way.
Sure was.
And I think in this day and age, there's a significant amount of growth that's happened between races. I think white people are growing up as well. I've seen white people who feel compassion when they see black folks being accosted, when they see black folks being unjustly harassed, not only by police, but by other white people, right? It's taken generations for it to happen, and everybody's not going to wake up at the same time, but to see it going on and to see that there is change happening, it's the same thing, once again, that, and I will say this because, you know, we talked about Martin Luther King. It's the same thing Martin Luther King was kind of pushing. Hey, we can live amongst each other, and it doesn't have to be everybody. It should be, but if we can get 5 or 10, right, and get their friends and their friends, then we got some motion. And that's what it's about, keeping the motion going. As long as white people are waking up and realizing that there are mistakes being made within the judicial system and America isn't perfect, then it gives the next black person and say Mexicans and other individuals, you know, a chance at being able to live here and not become equal, but at least be looked at as a human.
Brandon Bosley, you're very generous.
I try to be.
You are. And this is the end of Showdown for tonight. I appreciate you for joining me here, and we'll do it again sometime. This is Showdown. I'm Mark Kasen. Brandon Bosley. Good night.
Good night.